Hello and welcome. Can everybody hear me okay? We're always working on audio with all our events. I am Carrie Edinger, the Historic Program Manager for the Sheridan Community Land Trust, and thank you for coming out today for this Explore History program. Besides partnering with the Hub on Smith every second Tuesday of the month to provide this program, we are also partnering with Sharie Shada, the superintendent at Trail End, which will take us around the original grounds today of Trail End. Bill Yellowtail, Bill, you want to raise your hand? Member of Crow Nation, who will share the Crow migration story today as we look out into the Bighorn Mountains. And Clark Van Houser, is that right? Hooser, City Arborist, and Kelly Norris, District Forester of Wyoming State Forestry. They will share about the City Arboretum and also some of the other exhibits, is that the right word?
Yeah.
That are along the pathways. We're very excited about this program and to get outside. It's kind of been a long winter. So I am also want to mention an upcoming event that's also part of our tour. The Miss Indian America Tree Dedication Ceremony is on July 29th at 10 a.m. and it is on the other side of Kendrick Park, and Clark is going to talk about his work with the Miss Indian America Collective as we get down to that portion of the park. Thank you all for coming out today, and here's Sharie.
Thank you. Well, welcome to Trail End. I'll give you a brief history in case you haven't been here before or if it's been a while, to kind of put this in context. This was the home of John and Eula Kendrick, and it was finished for them in 1913. And Mr. Kendrick is your classic Western rags to riches story. He first came to Wyoming from Texas as a cowboy on the Texas Trail in 1879. He eventually made a fortune in both cattle ranching and real estate, so he and his wife built this home and moved in with their 2 children. He also went on to have 10 ranches, was governor of Wyoming, and then a 3-term United States senator. So when you go inside the museum, you get a really authentic look at how the family lived here in the early 1900s. But today we're going to talk about the landscaping. I don't usually get to give this tour, so this is a really nice reason to talk about the outside. Trail End was the first professionally landscaped private home in Wyoming. Before this, people really only hired landscape architects for public spaces like government buildings, parks, even cemeteries. But in the late 1800s, people started using architects for their grounds. And that's what the Kendricks did. So in 1911, the Kendricks hired the Minneapolis firm of Morrell and Nichols to design an outdoor space for them, and in 1914 this landscaping happened. So let's see. So the overall feel of our grounds is a very natural style. They didn't want a formal English garden type of thing. They wanted what's called the natural style. So everything you see up here is planted in a certain spot for a certain reason, and we've got meandering pathways throughout, and it's a very park-like setting. So we're going to walk around the property, and I'll have some photos to pass out to you all. But we are going to start right here on the front lawn, and I'm going to have you do what I have my 3rd graders do. You're going to take your hands like this, and you're going to frame your view. So if you look out over there, you frame your view. What your tall fingers are doing are what these trees to the left and right are doing. They're poplar trees. They're very fast growing. And they're directing your eye out over downtown. You can't really see to the left, you can't really see to the right, because they didn't want you to. They're small. The high school is over there where the junior high is now, and you can kind of see down to the railroad. On the other side, you can see the factory, the sugar beet factory and the flour mill. Kind of hide that away. So hide the stuff that isn't as aesthetically pleasing. Frame the view that is. They also framed another view, and that's where we'll end our tour. But the Kendricks planted 30 different species of trees and shrubs on the grounds. What you see here today is the original yard. It's 3.8 acres. And if you've ever walked our perimeter, you might see a line in the grass. That's the concrete footing for a wall that was never built. But everything you see up here today is what they originally intended to have as their yard.
Carriage house, original, was that built at the same time?
Yes, our question is the carriage house original, was it built at the same time? The answer is yes, it was actually finished first. So before they used it as a carriage house, they lived in it. It was finished 3 years before the mansion. So the big room, if you've ever been to a play there, it's now the Civic Theater Guild Carriage House Theater. The theater room was their living room where they intended to put their carriages. You'll walk by horse stalls as you first come in. Those are original. And the daughter, Rosa May, and the cook each had a horse stall as a bedroom, and a kitchen was in another horse stall. Upstairs was intended to be the hayloft, but that's where John and Eula had their room. And then Manville, their son, had the living room to sleep in. Oh yes, by the time they moved into the mansion, they already had 2 1912 Cadillacs, so it became their garage in addition to their carriage house. Okay, does everybody have photos? Excellent. So I wanted to point out this very first picture of the house taken before the landscaping was done. And if you look or want to turn around and compare it to today, it's very plain. You can't see anything behind it. No houses, no trees. On the right side, you can see the roof of the carriage house through the porch in the photo. And then just comparing that to today. That's what it first looked like. And if you flip to the next page, you can see the landscaping as it looked in 1916. Everything was very small. You could still see for a long ways up here. It's fun to try to match up the trees in the photos to what you see today, if they're still there. I don't know how many of these originally made it. And then the next photo is of, should we have 2 boys with their hands around a tree trunk? And I'm pretty sure the tree in that photo is the one right here.
Wow, yeah, I bet, because you can see the hill lines in the back.
So in 100 years, that's how quickly that tree grew. Sometimes we have to, well, we always have to do tree maintenance as trees get old towards the end of their lifespan. You want to make sure that you don't have any widowmaker branches, nobody's going to get hurt, so we do come through and maintain our trees. We saved 2 of our trees for chainsaw sculptures. One of them is over here. It might be behind the tree for some of you. And it's a pair of, it's supposed to be owl wings. We have several great horned owls that nest up here on the other side of the property. And so our Friends Group president did the carving of that one. The other tree we left, he turned into a grandfather clock, and it's a bench attached to it. The face on the clock reads 4:20. That was the time Mr. Kendrick passed away. And so on November 3rd, when he passed away at 4:20, he calculated it so that the sun hits the face of that clock directly. That took some planning. Okay, does anybody have any questions about anything over here before we move on to our next section?
Sharie,
Yeah.
are you any plans to replant like these big? Okay.
If we do have to take a tree out, we will replant it. We have a southern catalpa tree over here along the drive, and somebody took one of the pods and started a tree for us. And so we already have that one growing close to it in case that one goes. We've had to replant several maple trees. We want to keep it looking the way they intended, but we don't want the public to get harmed by any dead trees over here. Yes. Anybody else? Okay,
I'll just say that that's a great sledding hill.
Oh yeah, it's a great sledding hill. We have pictures of the family sledding down it in the 30s, and sometimes the junior high gym class comes over to use it, homeschool groups, and then on weekends we get a lot of sledders. We've also partnered with the Land Trust to have a sledding event here when we have snow. We had to cancel it because of no snow before, and have a morning that the public can come out and learn about the mansion and sled the hill.
Sounds good to me.
Well, and I'll have to tell you that my dad, I'm Diana Kendrick, and one time they did a little experiment. This was back in the day when no Highland Park, nothing, so they walked over to Linden every day for school. And he was a bit of an engineer even as a child. And he decided to do an experiment. What would happen if you started building a snowball up here, rolled it down the hill, and then rolled it down the boardwalk. All I can tell you is the boardwalk suffered a pretty calamitous accident. And I think he and his compadres, my grandfather, raised money and paid for the repair of the boardwalk. Lots of snow on occasion.
So think about that next time you walk down to the park. Okay, we're going to head over to our north lawn now. Okay, on this north side, I wanted to point out these tall blue spruce trees. These were brought in by the wagon load from Montana and planted along the sidewalk to help protect the house from northern winds. Well, we have some empty spots because they're braced for the northern winds, and one time we had 80-mile-an-hour southern winds come, and it blew 2 of them over, if anybody remembers that, about 10 years ago. So we've got some empty spots because of that, but otherwise, these are all the trees that were brought in for the winds. We also have some new plantings in between the sidewalk and the street. You can see the fencing around them to protect them from deer, and that was done in conjunction with the city of Sheridan. We received a grant, and that is to replace the original elm trees that were taken out by Dutch elm disease. So if you look at the photo of the tennis players here, in the background, you can see these little trees on the left side of the photo. Those are the elm trees that later went away. What we have now are disease-resistant elm trees. And Clark, is there anything I'm forgetting about these guys?
No, yeah, we wanted to honor the true vision of the Kendricks, so we were able to put some more elm trees back in that are resistant to the Dutch elm disease. We also added some different species, such as the Japanese tree lilacs here, some more hawthorns. A big thing for our community and what our community forestry program is trying to promote is species diversity. With Dutch elm disease, we had so many elm trees that once that fungus came into town, we lost a whole bunch of trees because we only had that one species. So if we have a bunch of different species growing and we have a pest come into town, we're only going to lose 2%, 5% of trees rather than losing upwards of 20 to 50% in some cases.
Yes, thank you. And they're not only on this north side, but they are on the west side as well. Kathy?
Was this the tennis court? Those are the
No, that is our next stop. I just wanted to stop here real quick and point out these trees. Then we can go over to the tennis court and maybe we can stand where the photographer was standing. So let's move over this way. Okay, this is just a brief stop on our tour. This was the original lawn tennis court, so it would have been grass. The backstops are still here. That's what's growing behind you and in front of you. There's also a concrete line designating the end of the course here. And so this is where the photographer was standing when he took a picture of the Kendrick son Manville and his best friend Harry Kay. They're standing like where you guys are. And so you can just imagine those little trees there. There's nothing growing on the backstop yet. It's just the fence. And the net would have gone right through the center.
So we're in G on this?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Because I'm not really good on directions, so I'd like to know where I am.
Yeah, you're at G. You're at G.
Okay.
Yeah, so these brochures identify the species, thanks Kathy, on our map. So you can go around at your own leisure and check everything out. A lot of the trees have little ID tags with a QR code. If you scan it, it'll take you to plantsmap.com and it gives you more information about that species. Any questions about this side? All right, we have one last stop on the other side of the carriage house. So if you just want to go back to the driveway, we'll head over there. If you look at the last picture in your packet, the photographer was up there on that bricked-in balcony looking over this way to the southwest. This is a picture about 1927. You can see the edge of the carriage house courtyard wall, which is over here behind you to help orient you. See our sidewalk here. Over where the picnic tables and the shed are was the vegetable and flower cutting garden. So they could grow flowers and bring them inside, and then lots of vegetables. There's also apple trees in there. that still produce apples, even though some of the trunks are hollow. It's pretty amazing. We'll grow apples about every other year. And you can also see the young elm trees in the back that are what we've replaced along the street. So even since 1927, you can see how much has grown up around this whole property. I don't have much else to say about this section.
So Sharie,
Yeah,
there's really not a street over there in this photo, is that right?
it's there, but
A dirt road or something.
maybe it was designated as a street. I don't know if it was paved. Oh, I see what you're saying.
I mean, right?
Yeah, so,
So that's
and there's no houses there, which there are obviously houses there today. I don't know when the road was officially put in, but originally Pioneer, which dead ends right over here, was put on the map as a through street down towards the park. On the original plans, it's not dead ending right here. Okay, the last place we're gonna go to, and I'll just tell you now, and they can get the microphone set up for our next presenter. When we get over and stop on the hill, take your fingers like this again, and check out the view that they're framing from their south lawn. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm gonna turn it over. Yeah.
I have one question.
Yeah.
What was the original acreage? Like, I know he donated a portion for the park.
Yes, so he donated land for the park, for the buffalo and elk pasture. He had land holdings all over town. The original acreage for his home is what you see today, almost 4 acres. Yeah. Okay, let's move on over. I'll turn the sound system over. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for coming to this, and we'll have our next presenters.
My name is Bill Yellowtail, and I want to begin by saying show.j. Want to try that? Show.j. Yeah, show.j. It means hello. It's a greeting. It means hello in the Apsaraka language. Now, when you see it spelled, you will find it impenetrable. So say Apsarake.
Apsarake.
Okay. You know, it's an ethnographer's spelling, and those are impossible. So now you know Apsarake. Some say Apsaloke, which is wrong. It's Apsarake, and here's the reason. This is the country of the mountain crow. Apsaloke, with an L, is the country north, up toward the Missouri River. That's the country of the river crow. 2 very distinct bands of crow, historically, culturally, linguistically, now combined as one. That's more than you wanted to know, right? Is everybody from here? No. Anybody from elsewhere?
Originally.
Okay, all right. Well, we would say to you, Kahe. Kahe means welcome. Welcome to Crow Country. My job today is to provide a bit of historical context for this region, and it leads me to think about John B. Kendrick and his relationship with Crow Indians, Apsarake, who were here prior to his coming, and with whom he surely had encounters and relationships. I wanted to tell you the legend of how Crow people came to be here, and why we Crow people call this, we refer to this as the heart of our heartland. This is the center of the world, right here, the center of the world for Apsarake people. Here's the story. You see, the Apsarake were once part of a mother tribe who were over in, present-day North Dakota, northern North Dakota, and they were part of the mother tribe of Hidatsa Indians. Those folks were agriculturalists. They lived in permanent villages, and they raised the classic squash, beans, and corn, and that was their subsistence. I hope some of you have had a chance to go over there, or will avail yourselves of a chance to go over to northern North Dakota there and visit the Knife River villages, for example. Extensive. In fact, so extensive were their villages that when Lewis and Clark arrived in 1804, their observation was there were more Indians in the Hidatsa and Mandan and Arikaraw villages there. By that time, they had consolidated. There were more Indians there than there were of all people in Philadelphia. Can you believe that? It was an immense complex. Well, so it is said that it had to be around 1450, thereabouts. It is said that there came a point when two young men, went out for what we call the vision quest. We Crows call it fasting. And they were seeking their spiritual direction, what that boils down to. And it's a process of going out and humbling oneself before God and asking for divine guidance. So these two gentlemen, young men of the Hidatsa, this was early along. In fact, like I say, early 1400s. The precise date, of course, is lost to time. A man named Red Shirt and a man named No Vitals, No Intestines. I don't know how to say that in Crow language, but no intestines. These two young men went out to seek their spiritual guidance, a process of fasting, no food or water or equipment or anything for 4 days, and hoping that they will receive a divine revelation, if you will. So, after the required 4 days, they came back, and sure enough, both had been successful. Both had received what we call a vision. Each had received their vision. Red Scout reported that his vision instructed him to stay there and raise corn. Corn appeared prominently in his vision. By contrast, No Vitals, No Intestines vision showed him a plant that was for him to find out towards where the sun sets. And the plant was described for him, but he was not native there, so he was to find it. So he announced to the community, anybody that wants to join me, Red Scout is going to stay here, and at your option, you may follow me if you wish. So these folks abandoned the agricultural way of life and launched on a long migration, an odyssey, if you will. Their route, mind you, afoot. This was before horses. Their beasts of burden were dogs. So they had to have been traveling fairly efficiently, let's say. They headed west. And they went up the Missouri River and then at some point veered northward into what we now would think of as Alberta. And they came to a well-known landmark that we have today, right at the Alberta, Canada, Montana border, called Chief Mountain. Maybe some of you have been there in your explorations up towards Glacier National Park. It's an amazingly prominent site. The Absaroka stayed there and were uncertain. It was cold and miserable. That's pretty far north. So, once again, Mr. No Intestines said, I'm going to go out, you all wait here, rest up. Well, I'm going to go out and seek further guidance. So he did, and in a few days he came back and he reported that his, sure enough, he had had a visitation, and it was revealed to him that they should cross the Rocky Mountains and proceed southward then along the west face of the Rocky Mountains. In fact, the story goes that they actually passed Great Salt Lake. Really ugly, salty, meaning no disrespect to my friends the Mormons, but it took the Mormons to find a home there, not the Absarokes. Anyhow, so they proceeded southward. They went south as far as, if you look on a map, as far south as New Mexico, where they were able to veer eastward, once again with divine guidance. They veered eastward and proceeded east into the woodlands that now we believe to be the Canadian River over in Oklahoma. Now, there they turned and they headed north and west. Now, why they turned, I don't know if that was a divine guidance thing or whether, there were lots and lots of natives there who might not have been entirely welcoming. So, No Intestines party might have been forcibly turned back. Nonetheless, they headed northwest and they came back and bumped into the Rocky Mountains and then headed northward. Well, at a certain point in this long odyssey, they were just tired. They just were exhausted. They were beginning to lose hope that they would ever find this plant that they were seeking, so as to find their heartland. So, right here, out on, let's see, I guess that's Little Goose, huh? Over by the Brenton.
Yep.
Little Goose Creek, they stopped. And there they camped. And No Intestines said, you all rest. You all just bide your time here, rest up. I'm going to go back up on Clouds Peak, right there. I'm going to go up on Clouds Peak and I'm going to fast, and I will see if I can be given instructions. So he did. Fasted, and during his fast, a divine guide came to him and instructed him. This divine guide said, congratulations, you've arrived. I'm reminded of Brigham Young. He came over the pass over to where he could see the Salt Lake Valley, and he said, this is the place. Well, similarly, no vitals, was instructed, this is the place, you've arrived. This, where you stand on the top of Clouds Peak, is the center of the earth for you Apsaraka people. This is your center. Now, any way you look, and as far as you can see, any direction, that is to be your place. So, from there, goodness, well, I've never been there, but I assume you could see practically to the Black Hills. You could see north, way above the north of the big snowy mountains. That way, clear across the Bighorn Basin, Yellowstone National Park, and south, goodness knows, way down south of the Bighorn Basin, down into the Wind River Mountains. All of that is your homeland now. Now, I want you to look, the visitation said, I want you to look back down where your camp is, where your people are. There you will see the plant. It's sacred tobacco. That's what it's called yet today. Sacred tobacco, though it's not used for smoking, it's the sacred tobacco. Now, you look down there and you will see these plants sparkling like stars. Sparkling like stars. They're right down there where your folks are. And you go and harvest those plants. As long as you protect this land and landscape and all of its resources, you will thrive. The Apsaraka people will thrive. If you ever abandon this landscape, fail to care for it, then you will fail. And part of that is that you must protect and cultivate and perpetuate this sacred tobacco. So, thus rejuvenated with the good news, we've arrived. No Vitals went back down and greeted his folks with all this great news, and they went about harvesting that plant, which he had been shown and now is identifiable. They created a formal organization whose responsibility, very solemn responsibility, was and remains to propagate the plant, the sacred tobacco. It has a scientific name that I don't know, but it's well known. So we have we call it the Tobacco Society. Began then, and yet today is carried on by the Apsaraka people as a solemn responsibility, not just to the plant itself, but to the well-being of the Apsaraka community. So there we are. So this is the Crow Heartland. That's the center of the world. And since we assume that was about 1450, just from piecing together the archaeology as well as the stories that have been pieced together over recent years from old storytellers. So, that leads you then to understand, why are we all here? It's Crow country to be sure, but we're all here, right? Why are we here? I'll tell you why. There was a man in about 1830 named Sore Belly. I think his name came because he had a really bad stomachache once upon a time. Sore Belly was his name. And he told, made a speech to some group or other who recorded his story as best they could, translated into English. And it's quite long and beautiful. It's poetry. But the essence was that the Crow country is good country. Anywhere you go from here, you fare worse. Any direction you go, very far. But as long as you're here, you fare well. To the north, it's cold, winter. The Missouri River is up there. He said that a crow's dog would not even drink Missouri River water. To the south, it's too hot. To the east, there are enemies, ancient enemies. We can only venture to the east so far, and besides, that's beyond the Black Hills, is not our territory. To the west, there are high mountains, and furthermore, uninhabitable territories, thinking of the Great Basin and the Great Salt Lake Basin. But as long as you stay here, you fare well. Crow country is good country. So, well, that was prophetic, huh? That's why we're all here. It's Crow country. It's our country. All of us. We come here for those reasons. We love this landscape and this community because it's for all, it's wonderful for all of us. You know, I think about, hell, John B. Kendrick and the Wallops and Eatons, you know, and many, many others. What attracted them to here? They could have gone anywhere. This is the promised land, if you will. So that is by way of a story. The cultural and historical backdrop for this landscape. Now, I want to finish with this. I want to say that now this is your story. Here's why. An old uncle of ours, a man named Barney Old Coyote, whom some of you might have even known. Dr. Barney Old Coyote was a scholar and great keeper of stories. I listened to him make a statement once upon a time where he said, look here, a story is a living organism. A story thrives as long as it is told and retold. The worst thing you can do to a story, frankly, is write it down because it freezes it, you see? And everybody is obligated then to read it and recite it out of the book. He said, that's death to a story. A story gains its life from being remembered and retold. So, he said, to anyone who hears a story from us crows, now it is not only your privilege, but your duty to keep this story alive. So, in the spirit of Barney Old Coyote, I gift this story to you, and I hope you will accept it, and I hope you will feel perfectly comfortable with retelling the story as best you can recall it, and in your own language. A story, language changes. The story I recited would be recited in the Crow language, but it can be recited and is all the time in English. So now that's your story. Thank you. I would stand for any questions that are just burning in your soul. Yes, ma'am. Well, that's correct. And as I say, there is a taxonomic Latin name for it. It's not tobacco. It's not related to the tobacco of the East Coast, Virginia, and the like. I could look it up and find it, but it's its own separate, distinct species.
But it's still around. It's just something that there's a common name that you just don't have to know.
Well, the common name is the tobacco plant. And that's a really fascinating question. Did you all hear? Can we find it yet today? Is it still extant today? And besides the garden that's planted every year by the Tobacco Society, I am dying to go back out to the Brenton and have lunch on their patio that faces the mountains and imagine and maybe even search for the sacred tobacco. That's where it was found, and I'll bet you anything, it's still there once we learn how to find it. Be a very important spiritual journey for Crow people. Yes, ma'am. What use?
You said you didn't smoke. What was the smoke?
It's purely spiritual. It does not have a utilitarian purpose. As No Vital's revelation instructed him, look, you people, you perpetuate this plan, and as long as you do, you'll be fine. But if you fail, look out. You're going to begin to disappear. So it's not a utilitarian plant. It's planted in the spring in a garden and very carefully tended all summer long, and come fall, the seeds are harvested and very carefully kept until the next season. Now, all of this is done with extensive, complicated ceremony that essentially represents the migration story. There are pieces and elements of this extensive ceremony that lasts all summer that have to do with bits and pieces of the big migration, the big odyssey to here. It's a really cool idea, isn't it? Yeah, sir.
I joined the late. So there's a two men, Richard and No Vital.
That's correct.
They were adopted.
They were adopted. Richard, No Vital were adopted. That's exactly right. The No Vitals band left the Hidatsas. They retained linguistic connections, of course, for generations. And yet today, Hidatsas and Crows can understand one another roughly. But they became their own, if you will, political entity. So they wandered around, not aimlessly, but namelessly, and they became known to themselves, amongst themselves, as Bilage. Bilage. B means me. Bilage means us people, us folks. The Crows still refer to themselves as Bilage. When speaking to other people, we say Apsarake. Now the word Apsarake was imposed upon the Bilage by other tribal peoples with whom they encountered. Frenchmen listened to the interpretation, and they said, those are, I don't speak French, anybody here can help me. That means they are the gens de corbeau. Anybody speak French? I just made that up. No, it means people of corbeau is raven or crow. So that became in English crow. More than you wanted to know, I know. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any indication of how long that migration took, an estimate of?
There is not an estimate of how long the migration took. And I honestly don't know. It simply says that in the lifetime of one man, this man, no vitals, it happened. I presume, of course, he was a young fella when he left the upper Missouri, but I'll bet you by the time he got here, he was probably a geezer. Like me. Yeah, that's history. I love history, and Carrie, as a historian, and all of you who are historians know that there's a school of thought among historians that say that if it isn't written down, it ain't history. Well, the trouble is, there's a whole lot of history that came before people wrote stuff down. So when you write things down, well, you write down dates. If you recite history as living stories and from memory, generation passed on to generation, then those minutiae of dates and the like, they become blurry. But suffice to say, it was in one man's lifetime. Probably decades and decades. Okay, I have filibustered long enough, but thank you for your attention. And again, welcome to Crow Country.
I love it. Well, good morning. We're still in morning, right?
Yes.
All right. My name is Kelly Norris. I am the District Forester for District 5 for Wyoming State Forestry Division. So my office is located in Buffalo, but I cover Johnson, Sheridan, and Campbell counties. And we're going to talk a little bit about some history of this arboretum, since State Forestry was very involved in this. Back a decade ago, in 2012, State Forestry had received a grant to establish arboretums across the state of Wyoming. And at the time, I was the assistant district forester, and I reached out to the community program manager and said, I want one in my district. And Mark said, okay, Kelly, but where? We're trying them in Pinedale. We got them in Cheyenne. Some hard places to grow trees. That's why we're doing an establishment of an arboretum. And I said, you know what? Sheridan is one of the lowest places in elevation in the state. Let's look to Sheridan. And so I met with, at the time, the parks program manager, and brought in our community program manager and brought him right here. This area was just an open, blank area. We had some green pivots that were just getting watered randomly across this area. I don't know if you guys ever recall that from 10 years ago. And I said, I think we need to have it here. And we were all like, yeah, this will be the perfect place to have an arboretum. You get this beautiful backdrop of the mountains. We'll have to figure out some watering, but I definitely, the city was on board. We met with the Kendrick Mansion and was told to hold on. This viewscape here, there's a reason why this is left open, and it was per the request of Kendrick Mansion. We noted to take a look and do our fingers, and if you are to realize it, you're looking across up there over to where the Kendricks are buried.
That's the cemetery. And so they wanted to leave that open at the time, as well as there's a lot of weddings here. And the weddings also really wanted to have a place to have a wedding. So we said, okay, we can make this work. And we designed an arboretum in regards to specifically having this area be open. The trees that you see here, the ponderosa pines, the silver maples, these are all original trees. And the arboretum has been built up around that. So in 2012, we worked with this program manager for the city of Sheridan, and he picked out the trees he wanted to have. We had about 56 trees, so two trees of every species, if that makes sense, were to be planted on both sides here. In 2013, they were planted. State Forestry funded the purchasing of the trees, and we brought the City Tree Board here. And the people from the City Tree Board represented the college, the girls' school. We had also the university. We had the city. We had quite a large group here planting, as well as many of us coming from State Forestry. And we have videos of the time, and we're really hopeful. And then I'm not sure if you remember in 2013 what happened that fall in early October, but we had a snowstorm called Atlas come through, and it demolished over half our trees because of the snowstorm that came, and it came very fast, and it was about almost 4 feet of snow hit Sheridan. And so not only did we have trees ruined here, the Kendrick Mansion also had quite a bit that they had to repair from that. So we replanted, and I actually have emails in here and notes of all the trees we replanted. We replanted about half our trees. So some of these trees are original from 10 years ago. Some of these trees were original from 9 years ago. And then again, we had a major event in 2014. In November, we had a massive swing in temperature. I was on a wildland fire on the face of the Bighorns right above Buffalo. And we went from 80 degrees to negative 25 in less than 48 hours. It was like within 24 hours. And that swing shift went across from the northern part of the state all the way down to the southern part of the state and over out east. And again, we lost about half of our trees into the next year. I have emails in 2015. Here are all the trees that died. Here are all the trees that look like they may survive. And we had to do another pretty large order here. Again, so we have trees that are 10 years, 9 years, 8 years. And then from that point forward, multiple other years here, which is what it is. It's what happened. We had two very unlikely 100-year events occur back to back when we were trying to establish trees in Wyoming. But here we are, and from that point forward, it's been really a project that the city of Sheridan has put their heart and soul into. And I'm really excited to pass this on and have Clark share with you everything that has been done since moving forward from 2016 establishment, and what the city has done since then.
And that's what it takes here, and thank you for your dedication. Like, that's what it takes here, so thank you.
Yes, thank you. Because I think, one other thing I did want to say, because it was a lot of dedication beyond just the trees. The tree board at the time also were very dedicated in their signs. So I do want to take a moment here to acknowledge the city tree board in the city of Sheridan. Out of the 7 arboretums that went in across the state, every other arboretum has very distinct similar signs where we ID each tree, at the post, but not Sheridan. No. Sheridan had an artist paint trees and created their own signs, created their own language. They had an intern and some college students create their own language. And if you see those original signs, the college class, the welding class, actually created the signs too.
So it was a real community endeavor, and the city of Sheridan actually owned the paintings of all of those signs. And it's about the only arboretum you're going to see in the state of Wyoming with these beautiful signs in place. What happened, we learned, is as we started losing trees and gaining trees, it was much easier to standardize our signs a little bit over time. But I do want to acknowledge that too. The creativity of specifically this arboretum is very unique in the state. And so again, credit to the city of Sheridan and the tree board.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
How many total trees? You said 2 of each species, but how many total did you originally?
It was, originally we had 56, I believe. Yes, it was 56. What are you at today?
I've lost count.
I feel
Yeah.
like you guys have way more than that.
Yeah, we do. So we recently, I'm Clark Van Hoosier. I'm the arborist for the city of Sheridan. I started in 2018, so it's now my responsibility to care for all the trees growing in public spaces, such as our parks and my favorite place here, the Arboretum. Yeah, we've definitely added a lot to it, and as Kelly mentioned, you know, Wyoming is a very tough place to grow trees. And Zach Hauk, who wasn't able to join us today, has a good phrase that you should plant a tree at least 5 times before giving up on it. And one of the things we're doing here, because Sheridan is, you know, a pretty fortunate place compared to the rest of the state, is we're kind of pushing our limits with some of the stuff that we're growing up here. We put in magnolias last year that made it through the winter. We have ginkgo here.
Got a ginkgo?
Yeah, little ginkgos kind of back there behind the spruce trees.
Cool,
Yeah,
that's cool.
they're doing well, and that's probably like the 3rd time we put ginkgo in. So we do it. We don't give up right away. We have a London plane tree over there that's making it. That's probably one of the few, and that's an original. One of the few trees one of the few London plane trees you'll find in the state. So yeah, Wyoming's a very difficult place to grow trees. But Sheridan is probably if there was a place in Wyoming to grow a tree, we have a great town for it. And one of the things that's an indication of that is in our community we actually have 14 of the state champion trees. A champion tree is the largest tree of the species in the state. 2 of those are out at the Brinton Museum. We have the largest Scotch pine in the state out there. We have the largest linden in the state out there. We have the largest apple tree, largest buckeye, largest locust, largest black locust.
Multiple maples.
Multiple maples. We have the silver maple, the Norway maples right down the hill. So Sheridan's a very fortunate place to grow trees. And I found it pretty interesting looking at Sherry's photos this morning. You know, it's if you look at past photos of the town and you get outside of, you know, the Little Goose watershed, it was really a pretty barren place. The majority of the trees that we see here now in our forest didn't grow up here naturally. They were planted by people. So I think one of the cool things about trees, especially looking at the historical context, is they provide a connection. You know, all these trees, the large majority of the trees that were planted here in Sheridan were planted by people that had lived here and called this place their home in the past. So why did these people plant these trees? So many trees, so many people over so many years and decades. I think there's, in my opinion, I think we have this, you know, innate connection with trees. And there's something inside of us that we connect with the benefits of the trees, whether it's those, you know, provisional benefits, you know, food and shelter and fuel, or some of the more, you know, current benefits that we're aware of, such as clean air and wildlife, aesthetic beauty, and a sense of place. So one of the things we want to do with the Arboretum is to promote and educate the public on the benefits of trees. That's a big goal of the program up here. And I think, you know, all of us here, majority of us, would be quick to say that, yeah, we realize the trees have good benefits. I don't think as many of us would realize that a lot of our trees here aren't naturally grown. And because they aren't naturally grown, it does require a little bit of extra care, a little bit of extra management. There is a proper way to plant a tree. There is a proper way to prune a tree. There is a proper way to water a tree. And I think a lot of that's taken for granted sometimes because we live in such a great forest. Our old cottonwoods, probably our largest, certainly our oldest trees, they're reaching a point where a lot of them are starting to retrench. They're not dying necessarily, but they kind of shut down limbs, and those limbs fall off and they hit cars and houses and people. So a lot of our cottonwoods are getting removed. Same with our big silver poplars, the 2 trees right behind us on there. I mean, you can see there's some pretty large, hazardous limbs there. Out here in this field, not a big deal if that's sitting, over your house, over your car. It's a pretty rational decision to want to take that large, historic tree down. So we're losing a lot of our old trees. Our white birch in town are disappearing. Bronze birch borer is taking them out. I'll be surprised if we have many white birch left, within 5 years. In 2019, we found pine wilt disease, which attacks Austrian pines, ponderosa pines, mugo pines, Scotch pine. In 2020, we found Japanese beetle, which attacks over 300 species of plants, particularly likes our fruit and our flowering trees that provide a lot of that aesthetic beauty in the spring. And we have emerald ash borer, which will probably show up. That's an invasive insect that attacks and kills our ash trees. On city property, ash trees make up about 20% of our tree canopy right now. If you took that over to all the trees in town, it's probably about similar. So when that insect shows up, there's a chance for our community to lose, 1 in every 5 trees. So it could be a lot different town. So the important thing, not to be all doom and gloom, but the fact that there is a need to not just take these trees for granted. We need to continue planting. We need to continue diversifying our trees and celebrating and promoting their benefits. The Arboretum is really here to serve that purpose, to bring members of the community together to talk about trees. And probably the biggest indicator, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, of a healthy forest is diversity. Diversity in age class, so we don't have a bunch of old trees that we have to take down due to their lifespan. And diversity of species, so we don't have an emerald ash borer or a Dutch elm disease type of issue come through town. So the Kendrick Mansion is an amazing historical place, both for the mansion itself and for the landscaping. In my mind, it's probably the original Arboretum in the state. So it's really cool to have our Arboretum set up right next to theirs. And up there we have a great collection of our tried and true species. We have our ponderosa, our cottonwood, our silver maple, the blue spruce, stuff that works that we see in our community. What we're trying to do down here is show the community that you don't just have to plant a ponderosa or a cottonwood or a silver maple. We can do locust, we can do birch, we can do ginkgo, we can do different varieties of maple. We have new elm species that are available to us. We have different maples available to us, box elders. We have hackberry and yellowwood and mountain ash. So I can go on and on, but we live in a really special place, and I think the Arboretum is a place where we can bring our community to celebrate how cool of our town is. So I would just really appreciate you guys all coming out. We could definitely walk around. I could show some stuff. I know we're kind of running long. We have done some additions. We have some signage up here, and we are going to be continuing to plant to the west, our west addition this season as well. So if you guys have time, if you want to walk around, I'm certainly willing to answer questions, point stuff out. I know we're running a little bit over, so I just want to give people the freedom to do what they want. But thanks for having me. Yeah, do you have a question?
Is Japanese beetle still in Sheridan?
It is. It's like most insects, once it shows up, it's pretty hard to eradicate. We've basically decided to stop eradicating the mission at this point. We're in a management program. So in 2020, we found it pretty late in the season, in August. And we captured 250 beetles that first year. This last year, we were able to trap throughout the full season, and we caught 6,600 beetles. So because we had only the tail end of the season in 2020, and then we had a full season of data last year, we don't know if the population necessarily exploded or stayed about the same. But we'll be actively trapping for them again this year. So we'll have a better idea of what that population is doing, if it is growing or if it's staying steady. Our management plan for attacking that, most of the beetle population is in this Kendrick, what we're called the Kendrick turf grass corridor. So the best way to treat for Japanese beetle is to put a turf product down when they're grubs in your lawn. So we've treated Whitney Commons, Kendrick Park, the Arboretum, the YMCA, which is a large a large breeding ground with the hope to knock the population down, but it is an insect that's going to be here, and we're going to have to learn to live with it long term. Oh yeah, we recently did get the Arboretum accredited, so we are now nationally recognized, which is one part of our goal to become the best Arboretum in the state, and I think we're on that path, so yeah.
Quick question. With these incredible temperature swings, could one of the advantages be that it kills insects that are not ready for that temp swing? I'm thinking of pine beetle, you know how we used to think it took so many weeks of super cold, but they do seem to be knocked back, maybe. I'm wondering what the research says about it.
Yeah, for a lot of our insects, pine beetles, Japanese beetle, emerald ash borer, there's actually pretty good evidence that a hard winter can kill those bugs. That's always the hope. It never quite seems to do the trick because it seems like we just aren't getting cold enough in the winter for long enough anymore.
But the temperatures, those extreme swings.
I can add to that.
Yeah.
So we do believe that the Black Hills, the epidemic with the mountain pine beetle, was helped very much by that 2014 temperature swing, because it happened to be at the right time. And when we went into 2015 and 2016, we did not see nearly the range of epidemic levels. So temperature can really impact, even with western spruce budworm up in the southern bighorns. We also noticed we had a late freeze at the end of June, probably right when they were coming out. Again, we've seen a pretty solid reduction. They're still there. These are native species, so native species are still going to always be there. But there is something to be said in some of these swings, if they're in the right time to actually make an impact. Yes, it can happen.
Thank you.
Carrie?
How about if we give a round of applause for all our speakers today and thank them for their time.